I came from a family of storytellers, and to be honest, I was the worst one out of the whole family.
Welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
Welcome to this week's show, brought to you as always by the amazing Vellum, the best formatting solution in the world. How are you doing, Mr. Nick?
I am good. It's release day, or it's day after release day, depending on how you look at it, because I'm in New Zealand. It's a day ahead of you. It's Tuesday where you are, Wednesday where I am, but the book came out on Tuesday, so I'm thoroughly confused. But I used Vellum to format it, and it's super easy. Hunting Summer, the new Nora Summer.
If you haven't bought it yet, it's still out there. Go grab it. It's time to read it.
Go get you some.
Also, hey, big thank you guys to you all of our Patreon supporters out there. We appreciate you so much. If you guys feel you're getting any value from the show, you can support us over at patreon.com/The Two Authors Podcast. We have tons of extras in the free tier, but we also have, like, just for a few dollars more, you get bonus questions from our listeners. You get podcast nuggets from me and Nick. And we also just recently added a whole new thing where you can go in there and you can sponsor our listener question. And you can, what that means is you come in, we set up the time, you pop on here with us and you ask us directly live. I guess it's called recorded live. We don't know the question ahead of time. You ask it to us, so we don't have time to think about it. It's a lot of fun. We've had a couple people do it. However, this week we're going to skip it because we have an amazing show and it's probably going to go a little long. And we don't want to eat up all of your time listening to us answering questions when we have some really cool people. Because today we have the New York Times best-selling author of the Longmire series, Craig Johnson. You know Longmire?
Oh, I love the TV series. I got to be honest. I now want to go read the books because I haven't read the books.
The books are phenomenal. I've not seen the show yet, so the show's on I'm trying to catch up enough to read
the show is freaking amazing.
The book was amazing too. So I am stoked. I got the chance to meet Craig at VoucherCon and had a fabulous conversation with him. So I'm excited about this one.
That's pretty typical of us. Did you notice that? With two halves make a whole. That's us. That's describes us perfectly. You've read the books. I've watched the series. We're a whole. We're
perfect. That's just us. You're so sweet. Look how you brought that around. Like, it's so sweet of him. It's almost like it's, my birthday or something. So let's not drag this on. Let us chat with Craig Johnson. So welcome to the show, Craig. It's so great to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have the backdrop. The folks, we're on audio only, so the folks can't see this. But you have the Wyoming backdrop, chinking in the.
It gets even better. Here, hold on a second. Wait.
Oh,
nice!
Look at that stove right there.
Troll really quick here in Wyoming. I gotta warn you. It actually came from a friend of mine, who's a big game hunter. And it's a moose for those of you who are on the audio version here, but it's a beautiful, British Columbian moose mount on the wall back here. And everybody that comes in immediately thinks I'm the gray white hunter. And I'm like, no. What happened was he had so many mounts that he was needing to get rid of some. So he had an auction and it was online like that. And he, wrote me and said, hey, Craig, these aren't going for as high as I wanted them to. Could you get on there like that? Maybe make a few bids just to kind of get some action going with them. And of course, I ended up with a moose.
What a tricky way to get you to buy a moose.
I know.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I should have seen that one coming a long way off.
Hey, I actually have some books for sale on there.
I noticed when you swung the camera around, what I noticed was I didn't actually look at the moose. I looked at the cast iron stove over there or heater.
Yeah. There's a wood burning stove.
That's brilliant right there. That's what I spotted.
Pretty well, with no complaints, and then that doorway there leads back out into the back pasture, here on the property, and it's a ranch, of about 260 acres, and that just opens up to the back pasture.
Well, let's just kind of wanted to chat with you a little bit, and just kind of start off the same question we ask a lot of people. It's kind of what sparked your desire to be a writer? How long have you been writing? It's kind of give us kind of a background into what made you a writer.
I'd like to think it was a lot more complex like that than what I'm going to tell you, but it really wasn't. I came from I came from a family of storytellers like that. And to be honest, I was the worst one out of the whole family. I guess. And so theory on that was, well, okay, well, if I can't tell stories, then maybe I could sit down and I could actually write. And so that was at a relatively early age like that. But the other thing I always say is that wanting to be a writer is kind of like wanting to be an astronaut. The odds against you are so great. Don't tell anybody. Just keep it to yourself. And that way, when it doesn't happen, you're not embarrassed like that, and you have made a fool of yourself like that. And so I kind of kept it to myself for an awfully long time like that. And then traveled around all over the country doing all kinds of, odd jobs like that, because in essence, what my theory was is that all the writers that I really enjoy have done other things in their lives. And so I kind of thought, well, you need to bring something to the table. You need to have some experiences to bring to the table like that, and life experiences like that to inform those characters and decisions you make and the stories that you tell and all that like that. And then if you're lucky at some point in time, not in the too far distant future of your life like that, you actually stumble across a story, and you and some characters. And, at that point in time, all the planets all kind of align, and suddenly you find yourself writing something that you really feel as though you have to write, that this is something important, maybe that's something not been done so much before, something that has a message, something that has characters that are compelling enough to hold your interest for a long period of time. As we all know, like it usually takes a little bit longer than a 3-day weekend to write a book, and so you really have to have enough interest in what it is that you're doing to stay with it, to stay on there like that and get the job done. And I guess I was about 43 years old like that whenever I sat down and wrote the very first book in the Walt Longmire series, The Cold Dish. It was a standalone book. It wasn't meant to be a series at all like that. And I was extraordinarily fortunate like that. I got the first draft of it done, reworked it, and then got picked up by a big agent there in New York, which was interesting because I think the way I went about it, I'm not so sure you could even do it nowadays like that. But I, wrote them, said, hey, I've got this book about a Wyoming sheriff, that I'd like to come by and drop off like that in your office. Because I at least was smart enough to realize that, like, if I mailed it, I would never hear from these people again like that. And so I thought, if I stop in there, looking the way I do, like that, then generally it gives a little bit of credibility to the fact that I'm writing about a Wyoming sheriff. And so, I went around like that and dropped it off at about half a dozen agents there in New York like that. And the majority of them, it was horrifying. It was painful. It was one of those situations where it was like something out of a Damon Runyon novel. I would walk like 4 stories up in a building like that and, knock on the door, and, they would, open the door approximately large enough for me to squeeze the manuscript through. And then I would say, thank you. And they would say, sure, kid, we'll let you know. And I'd turn around, walk away back to the stairs, and I would hear it going in the trash can as I walked away. Like that.
Yeah.
So, and then there was this one like that where this one agent, gave me, like 10 minutes of her time. And the 10 minutes turned into about an hour. And by the time I got back to the ranch here in Wyoming, like that, there was a message on the phone machine that said, don't give this to anybody else. I want it. And she actually passed it off to Catherine Court, who was at that point in time one of the presidents of Penguin. And she's the one that became my editor there at Viking Penguin like that. And then they published The Cold Dish with Viking in hardback, Penguin in paperback. And that's when they sat me down like it and said, we really, really like these characters. We really like this place. And we think that it's got more than just one novel. I mean, there's a lot more we'd like to know about these characters in this world. What do you think about, writing more of these like that? And it took a while for me to come around to the idea, but I finally did. I had to trim I think something like 250 pages out of that first manuscript.
That was going to be my question, was if you went into it thinking it was going to be a standalone, what did you do to change it to make it into a series?
Well, I don't know if cutting 250 pages made it into a series, but it certainly made it a much more readable book. I know, you learn so much about pacing, and you learn so much about, everybody, we all think we know what a book is about. when we get ready to write it, but we don't, until you finish the book. I mean, it's like a journey. It's not a destination, it's a journey. And so you don't know anything about it until you finish up. And so then you get to the end there and you think to yourself, okay, well, does this really need to be in here? No, really, probably not. But there was a lot of backstory and a lot of things that, just simply for the sake of pacing, had to come out, of that book. And there was a lot of material, a lot of stories that I thought, maybe they're onto something here. Maybe they're right. And that was 22 novels, 3 novellas, and coming next year, 2 collections of short stories ago.
Brilliant. What year was this, Craig?
05. So yeah, it was exactly 20 years ago like that. And the 21st book, actually, maybe it was 04, because the 21st book just came out in May, and I finished the 22nd one and actually started on the 23rd. So
okay, wow. So yeah, you're staying busy. So
I don't know about you guys, but it's like whenever I'm around my literary fiction buddies who put out a book like once every 7 or 8 years, I'm like, what do you do with your life? What do you do? If I didn't have like a book a year, to do, I'd be out, roaming the streets of Ucross, Wyoming, population 26. And that is a grim prospect.
I need something to do. Yeah.
You guys ever think about that? Whenever because it's a good, I'm not going to name names because they'd be angry with me if I did, but some incredible writers out there that I hang on every book that they write. And then it takes them 7 or 8 years to write another book, and I'm like, come on.
Yeah, quite. Yeah. We are both indie published, so we do closer to 4 books a year.
We do at least 4.
Yeah, so 6 to 4. I was trying to be generous, but yeah. So I often sometimes wonder, like, people
slacker now.
Not at all. No. It's just it is interesting, like how that you do talk to people, because we interviewed someone not that long ago she writes 80,000 words and then takes it and throws it away and starts over. And I'm like, whoa, that's like
she's done it every single book, and I think she's written like 12 of them, and they're big hits. She's a big author, yeah, and that's her process. She does it every time without fail.
There is something to that. It's the you can do the whole stream of consciousness thing, where you can just write and then go back and fix it. But to be honest, I don't have that kind of time like that. I've got a ranch here, I travel a great deal like that, with the books. I need to kind of know where I'm going and what I'm doing like it. And so one of the things I'm a big believer in is sitting down and doing an outline.
Okay, great. That was going to be our next question, actually. So you're a plotter.
I am like that, just simply because, in my experience, in 20 years, I've discovered it's a lot easier to rewrite an outline than it is to rewrite an entire book, And so when you can sit down and give yourself, it'd be like if we all jumped in my truck and took off, here from Wyoming and said, hey, let's go to Nova Scotia. And I would look at you guys and I would say, let's throw a map in the glove box, even if we don't, need it right away. Let's go ahead and have that map in the glove box just in case, we need it on down the road, somewhere out there in Canada like that. And so, for me, it's not like you're anchored to it. It's not like you can't change things as you go along later like that. But it's awfully nice to have a roadmap to remind yourself in so many ways of why and how it is, that you're writing this book. And I did that with the very first book, and I would be, I don't know. I'd have a hard time writing a book without having an outline to work from.
Speaking of that, how much do you outline? How much do you lay out? Are you talking bullet points? Do you lay out what you're going to expect in each chapter, or do you get more detailed?
All the above, and like even scene breakdowns like it, because I think that one of the key elements, there's certain elements, that go along with the type of books, that I write. Like, they're murder mysteries. And so there's certain mechanics that go along with that are very, very important, to the process of that book. The other thing is like nobody ever wants to talk about that dirty word pacing like that, because it's one of those things you either got it or you don't like that. But I think you can develop it in many ways, like at a lot of the time, just by knowing like that, by being able to see the book. I assume that like, there's some authors out there that can see that entire book in their heads like that, but I don't know about you, but I kind of tend to get lost sometimes like as I'm working on that thing for months at a time. And I need to be reminded, this was the message of this book. That's what this book is really about. This is the subtext, that's going to inform these characters and all these things that are going to happen. And so, for me, it's nice to be able to go back and look at those things. And then also, when you're talking about that pacing, you can look at the structure by looking at the outline. You don't have to just guess, what the pacing of the book is going to be. You can look at that book and say, boy, I'm really expository heavy in the beginning of this book. I need to move some of this, in the mid-range area to help support the narrative, to reveal here towards the end. I need to break some of this up a little bit. And it's just a lot easier to do that when you can look at the skeleton of that book and see what the structure is.
Do you happen to use some people have the big boards with all the stuff on it, or do you actually just have an outline that's a paper outline that you're going through everything, or?
No, I've got one of those.
You write on the walls like Faulkner did.
Photographs and yarn going from one point to another. It looks like one of those like serial killers. When somebody comes into the work. No, I don't. Look at I've got legal pads is what I've got. Look at, and I've got the whole outline all down on the legal pads. Now, then I do also have always like stacks and stacks of books. For the subject matter of whatever it is I'm going to be happy to be writing about, in that particular book, which I think is one of the great joys of what it is that we do. It's life effusing. And I mean, it keeps your head alive, a lot, better and longer than I think a lot of other people do. I mean, if we were stamping out widgets in a factory, that just doesn't, entertain your mind. It doesn't keep you reaching like that. But every time, you start a book, you're like, I don't know anything about this, so I need to learn about this. Okay, well, I need to do research on this. I need to go here and take a look at this place and see what this place is like. And I don't know how many times like that I'll be, over at the main house, and I'll be like laying there on the sofa, right beside the wood burning stove, like that. And my wife will, look at me and say, are you going to do anything today? And I'm like, I'm working here.
I got to ask you this side question. So, because this is interesting. So our characters live in our heads, right? And this is interesting because of you now have watched a TV series develop and evolve with your characters in it. Before that came out, how real was Walt Longmire in your head?
Oh, absolutely. He was marching around in there, fully formed. I mean, one of my favorite quotes about writing, and I've said this numerous times before, like it's from Wallace Stegner on Writing and Teaching Fiction, where he says the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based on what fuck that is. I mean, that's your job, to go and find people like that. And I'm fortunate that I live in a place, where there are very interesting characters like that to draw from, and my family a great deal too, like it. And so I get that question in a different form, like that, which is, now that you've seen the TV show, do the actors have an effect on you, as you write the books? And the honest answer, even though I know the actors would prefer to not hear it, is no, they don't. Like that. I wrote the books for about 7 years before the actors came along. And there are characters that are based off of my family, my friends, people I've worked with, people I've known my whole life. Like it would be very difficult for, let's say, Peter Weller, who plays Lucian in the TV show, to supersede my father, who is the basis for that character. I mean, I don't ever have to think about what my father would say or what he would do in any given situation. Not only will it be honest, but it's also usually relatively entertaining. I know him at a depth of level of who he is that I don't think you really have the opportunity to do with actors, because whenever you're looking at actors playing roles, you're getting a kind of like secondary format of somebody pretending to be somebody else from some other form of material. And I think it would be very difficult for that to supersede, the actual humanity of someone that you really know and have known for your whole life.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think one of the joys of writing a series that people potentially miss out on when they do standalones is the fact that the characters do evolve in your head. They live in your head and they talk to you. I know we all say, we joke about it and it's crazy, but when you put a line of dialogue down, when you're done putting that dialogue down, whether Walt would have said that or not. He tells you, right? In your head, you're like, I wouldn't have phrased it that way.
Or more importantly, I know, yeah, that's a Vic line. That's not a Walt line. Or, that's a Henry line is what that is. That's the joy of what we do as far as like the rewrite is concerned. One of the things I'm always telling my students, you really have to fall in love, with the rewrite. You really have to not look at that as some reoccurring head cold. You have to look at it as something that's a spectacular opportunity, to go in there, and rework all those things that you didn't know, from the previous version that you were working on. Like, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Cezanne, or maybe it was Matisse. I can't remember. But there was one of those painters like there in Paris, like at the Impressionists. Whenever he would sell a painting, people would have to lock their doors because he would literally come to their homes and go in their houses and touch up the painting, fixing things they didn't do right. And it always broke my heart because I'm like, as a painter, you don't really have that opportunity, because once it's gone like that. And I guess you could say the same thing about a book. Once a book is, published and sold, and out there in the reading public, like that it's out there and it's gone like that. But we do get so many opportunities to go back and just completely rewrite and remake that piece of work. It kind of makes it all worthwhile in my mind like that, because it improves so much more, when you're going through the rewrites like that, rather than just the first drafts.
So that being said, what is if you were talking to emerging authors now who are out there, like what is the best technique you take when you're going to tackle that second draft or third draft, to do the rewrite? What are you looking for first?
First of all, you get, what's the old statement? You got to strangle your darlings like that. I mean, don't fall in love with every, precious word there. I mean, realize, that this is a work unto itself like that. And so even though you wrote this really beautiful descriptive passage like that about this one character that encapsulates them so well, it might not really need to be there like that, and so you have to be open to the idea that that this is a work in process, like, and you've got to make allowances for that as you go through like that, and give it a chance to breathe on its own, rather than being strangled, by what it is you thought it should be in that very first draft.
So, I mean, I'm sure the process has evolved since the first book. Obviously, you wrote the first book and presented it, but then went through a process. But at what point do you pass it out of your hands and go to the editor? Because I know a lot of writers with trad work along with an editor along the way, back and forth, and then some of them present them with a package at the end of it, and then that process starts. How's yours work?
I'm pretty lucky like that because I have a couple of different editors. Like, I've usually got first of all, when Catherine Court, the president of Penguin, when she retired, they handed me over to Brian Tart, who is the president of both Penguin and Viking. And, what's wonderful with him is that, your chief editor, the first remark that they're going to make is going to be basically an overall response to the book itself. It'll be a page or 2 pages, basically, letting you know what it is that they thought worked in the novel, what they think might need, some elaboration like that, what needs to be cut down, where the pacing might seem a little slow, what the meaning of this book was, what was the purpose, a lot of these different things like that, that'll just be more general notes. And then, you can either, go back and go through the book again and possibly solve some of those problems before you give it to them again, or you can go ahead and have a hands-on editor, who will be a day-to-day editor like that, will go through like that and make responses like that, on a word-to-word, sentence-to-sentence kind of basis, like to give you a response that will coincide with the editorial letter, but be more detailed is what it'll be. Generally, I like to get both of them at once. Like, I like to get both at the same time. And then what I do, like, is I go back through, rewrite the entirety of the book, and then hand it back into them. And then if I've achieved what it is that they wanted me to achieve, and I feel as though I've achieved what it is I want to achieve, then it goes over to the copy editors. Like, and the copy editors are the ones that are going to be the nuts and bolts people. They're the ones that are going to fact check you. They're the ones that are going to, check your sentence structures, your spellings, all of those different like nitty gritty little things like that are going to be so important, because if you don't, then somebody's going to write you and say, just so you know, there should be a comma on page 129.
Oh, I know that guy. Yes.
A 98-page novel, and you decided to write me about a comma. Really?
I love when they write me and then they're wrong. That's always my favorite. That's always when I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. But you never hear back from them when that's the case. I mean, if they write and they say the spelling on this is blah, 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 and you write them back and actually, no, it's actually this. They don't ever write back and go, gee, I'm sorry. I wish I'd, you never hear from them again is what you don't ever get.
So one of the things about your series like that is so, I think, integral is your setting. Obviously, I mean, it's almost like it's its own character. Like, I mean, I've only been to Wyoming a couple of times, and after talking to you, I'm definitely interested in going a little bit more, but you do capture Wyoming as it's almost as its own character. So how do you, go after that vastness, that isolation kind of Wyoming without kind of losing or overshadowing the story?
That's a tough question. I mean, The easy answer to that question is that, well, I've lived here for, more than 30 years, and so I know this area that I live in, pretty well. I mean, you do have to be, as Dickens used to say, a student of human nature, but you also have to be a student of just nature. You have to be a student of place. I mean, that's going to inform so much about what it is that you write. And, when you're in a, kind of a unique area, like the least populated, area in the United States, like that, I mean, we only have 500,000 people in the whole state of Wyoming, and we're the 9th largest state. So, that's going to inform a lot about who Walt is and what Walt does. And most certainly, a lot of the people that Walt comes in contact with. And it's kind of my job, to make sure that I get that right. I think that, when you love a place, when you live in a place and you love it, the one thing that, that you owe that place is an honesty. There's an awful lot of times I'll read books that take place in the Rocky Mountain West, and I'll be like, there's no way that would ever possibly happen in a million years. I tend to refer to it as the Al-Qaeda in Crook County syndrome is what I tend to and I've openly stated that I don't ever want to write a book where Walt is on a cruise ship, or chasing Al-Qaeda in Crook County. I mean, I want him dealing with the things, that Wyoming sheriffs deal with like that, because the oddity and, the interest, of what it is that, that these sheriffs deal with like that is far supersedes any kind of made up plot lines that I can come from. I mean, just about every single one of my books actually comes from a newspaper article. They're generally all newspaper articles like that. And then what that does is it kind of keeps the books grounded in a reality where I know that, Wyoming sheriffs have dealt with this situation. And I may heighten those situations to the point where it becomes a more interesting novel. But nonetheless, I think that you have to kind of be true to place in as many ways as you can. I mean, the most horrible thing that could happen would be you guys jumped on a plane, got up in Wyoming, and looked around and said, this is nothing like what's in Craig Johnson's books. That would be gut wrenching for me. Like that. I want you to feel as though you know this place, when you finish one of these books, that you know this place as well as the natives do. That's important to me.
Yeah, I think you've accomplished that and a bit more. Yeah. So a spin-off of that, you're writing about law enforcement, and I have a series that's two series that write about law enforcement. So it's always tricky balance, right? Because you're accumulating a lot of things. Maybe one of those things might happen to one law enforcement in their whole lifetime, right? You're packing more stuff in, which we all have to do. And the timing of things is always difficult, especially with forensics, because it never happens in that time. So there's certain things we sort of accept that we have to get around. But you're also staying super authentic to the law enforcement in that region, as you talked about. Do you have, and especially when you started, did you have friends in law enforcement? Have you got contacts? Is there people you rely on and ask?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, that's the thing here. There are 23 counties in Wyoming, and so there are 23 sheriff experts that are more than happy to tell me if I screw up in one of my parts. And being in a place like Wyoming, they don't have any qualms about calling me up on the phone and going, hey, that comma that's missing on page 169.
Great. There's a cruiser in your front yard pulling up, and he's here to tell you about your editing.
But they're great like that because, I mean, you can, I can call them up and ask them questions, write them emails, see them. I go to a lot of the law enforcement. I did the Wyoming Law Enforcement Association's, conference, association conference, down in Casper here no more than a month ago. I'll go in, I'll do the sheriff's, association meetings, not only the Wyoming ones, but also the Western Sheriff's Association meeting, the National Sheriff's Association meeting. So I have some built-in experts, pretty much all over the country that, if I have a specific question, I can pretty much get in touch with one of these guys and they'll give me that kind of information that I need. The part that I was laughing about when you were forming your question there a little bit was that the forensic thing, it's not a strong suit here in Wyoming. I mean, we've got the Division of Criminal Investigation, which is, very much a state-of-the-art, marvelous, forensics lab down there in Cheyenne, state-of-the-art, everything like this. But Walt is the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state. And so it takes a while, to, and a certain profile of case, for, him to find a body and say you have to bring in, the Division of Criminal Investigation. And so an awful lot of times technology kind of lags behind, a little bit, maybe even more so as far as communication is concerned. I mean, I laugh about it because in the books, and even in the TV show, Walt doesn't carry a cell phone. phone like that. And I can always tell when somebody's not from Wyoming when they ask me, because they'll say, why doesn't Walt carry a cell phone?
Yeah, that's not realistic, is it? Surely everybody carries a cell phone.
They don't work here in Wyoming. Like, if you don't have towers and you don't have service or something like that, which, a lot of times, in the greater scheme of nature, you just don't have. That's one of the constant reminders that's in the books is that, boy, we kind of feel like, technology is the answer to everything. And, boy, Mother Nature has a great way of stepping forward and going, yeah, let me just take that away from you and see how well you do with it. Okay. It's kind of like in Lawrence of Arabia, whenever he's standing there with the compass like that, and the Omar Sharif character takes his compass away from him and says, what are you going to do now? Kind of, brings you back, to a baseline of nature, I think, like that, which we sometimes need to be reminded of. I mean, we kind of think we're, masters of the universe and controllers of our natures and all of this. And I don't know, nature has a way of kind of reminding us that doesn't work every time.
Plus, if you have no access to the internet, you don't have to solve anything real quick. And nowadays, you can just search things and be like, bam, I found the answer. And
and is there anything more boring than reading or writing about people on cell phones or people looking stuff up on computers? Is there anything more boring in the world?
Yeah, not really at all. That's the point where you're like, yeah.
I would much rather have Walt, get in his truck, drive over to somebody's house, knock on the door, have somebody come out, have him look at their face, let him see what they're saying. If you ask anybody in law enforcement, if they've got an important interview to do, the first thing they're going to want to do is do it live. And they want to look at that person's face and see, are they hiding something? Are they lying about this? What else is going on? What word did they use that made me, set this interest of mine off? Or what word did I use that, set them off? So there's so much more to do there, and that's not law enforcement techniques. That's just good writing.
Hey, if you put him in trouble and all he's got to do is dial 911 to get out, then it makes it very short. There's not a lot of drama. So,
oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about Netflix and Longmire now, because since they introduced it and became such a huge hit, how did that change the approach for your later novels? Because you said you were 7 books in before it came out.
I don't think it had an effect on the books themselves. No, sales. It had an effect on sales, but as far as I'd already pretty much charted, a course for myself, and for these books and for the characters and an arc and everything. I mean, I remember, one of the first meetings that I had with the producers. They said, "How's it all end?" And I said, what makes you think that I know that? And they said, we know you. And we know you have a plan, for how it all is. You must have some basic idea, Craig, of, your own longevity and what might be the last book and where's Walt going to be and what's going to be happening in his life. Like that, we just know that you probably do. And they were right. Absolutely I did. There's no way I'm going to write blindly, for 40 years and then just take a chance, to see where he's going to be at the end of it. No, I've got a goal, for all of those things like it. And so they were pretty marvelous to work with. They read the books, and not everybody in Hollywood reads the books. Sometimes they just read a synopsis like it and go from there. I mean, I remember one of the first statements that they made to me is that they said, your books don't break down into a 42-minute teleplay. And they said, well, we just wanted to let you know that, we're going to use bits and pieces, cherry pick from your books for the plot lines and all this, but there just isn't any way that we can, have the kind of detail that you have in a 400-page book in a 42-page teleplay. It just isn't possible. So I kind of went into it, with my eyes open, knowing that things, would be a little bit different than they were in the novels. And I was okay with that. I mean, it's kind of like singing about painting, it's different art forms, and you have to be aware of that. I mean, come on, I'm a cowboy author from a town of 26, right? And so it wasn't like I was John Grisham or Stephen King, negotiating my contract with Warner Brothers. The only thing that I could do, the only power that I had was to make sure that I had really good people to work with before I signed on that dotted line. That was the big thing. And then do the hardest thing in any kind of business that you're in. Leave them alone. You get the best people that you can, and then leave them the hell alone and let them do their job. Because I remember them asking me all kinds of questions about the casting, about this, about that. And I was like, guys, I'm assuming you know what you're doing, when you're doing this stuff. If you want my impressions, you can tell me things like that. But to ask me to, come out of the blue like that, and try and cast Walt Longmire. That ain't going to happen. It's probably not going to happen. I mean, I don't watch that much television. I don't see that many movies. And so anything that I gave you, would be, kind of useless in the long run anyway. I mean, if you want to bounce those things off of me, then I'm more than happy to give you a response, which they did. They were very, very good about, keeping me in the loop, of what it was that they were doing with the television show.
That's amazingly brave of you, I have to say, to have the strength to go, take my babies and run with it. And they did, and I don't know how you feel versus whether they really did a great job representing your books or not. But I can tell you that the series on TV, I mean, I was gutted for days when it was done. It's one of my wife and I's favorite shows that we loved.
No, I think they did a marvelous job. And there were choices that they made that were different from choices that I made like that. And they were always very good about explaining to me, why it was that they were doing what they were doing the way that they were doing it, because this, that, and the other thing was going to happen later on. And this, that had to happen on the way and all those type of things like that. And so they were very, very patient and very kind in acknowledging like it and letting me know, what was going on and how they were doing it. And then they sent me, every single script, and I would go through and line edit, all of the way, through like that. And because they offered me a spot, in the writer's room, and I was like, that is the last thing those TV writers want.
They don't want that.
Down gorilla of a novelist, sitting there watching everything they're doing. And, in book number 7, that was not what Walt did. Do they really want to hear that? They don't want to hear that, for goodness sake. And so they made me a creative consultant, which was fun like that, because that meant that I would get, like these, texts at like 2:00 in the morning, because evidently TV writers are like vampires and only work at night. And I would get these texts at like 2:00 in the morning that would say, we need to have a body wash off the Northern Cheyenne Reservation on the Powder River. And I would be stumbling around trying to get to my phone at 2:00 in the morning. Because if you have children or grandchildren, you answer the phone when it rings at 2:00 in the morning. And so I'd pick up the phone. I don't even have my reading glasses on. I'd look and see the question. I would type back, no, and then set it back down. And I couldn't even get back to bed before they would write back and go, you're just being difficult. And I would have to write them back and go, no, I'm not being difficult. What I'm telling you is the Powder River runs north onto the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. And at the time when this episode takes place, there's only about 2 inches of water in the Powder River. Like that. So not only is this body going to have to do the backstroke, it's going to have to be an extraordinarily skinny body to be able to do it.
That's brilliant. Okay, so a bit of a side one. So is there anything that's in the books that they left out of the series that you really wish they had put in there? Maybe a character or a specific.
Well, there's like, Walt and Henry's military background, which I think, kind of informs, who they are, to such an extent. I mean, I don't know about you guys like that, but I get so tired of, books and movies where the guy that, is delivering pizzas, gets in a situation and throws down the pizza box and picks up an AK-47 and suddenly knows how to use it and operate it, or can jump on a helicopter and know how to fly it, for God's sakes. How ridiculous is that? I mean, it takes training and it takes,
They do a lot of training at Domino's, first of all, Craig. I don't know. Like, there's a whole college for it.
Your pizza's late, man. I'm telling you. They're gonna. So for me, it's kind of important, that they had that kind of background to draw from, to make them capable of who they are and do the things that they're capable of doing. And so, probably that. I mean, a little bit of the backstory as far as that's concerned. One of the things they were concerned with was they wanted to young the characters up to a great extent, like that. They wanted them to not to be Vietnam veterans, which they are in the books, and make them younger. Like, and the one option that I gave them was I said, well, they could be, survivors, of the Beirut bombing, which killed, I think, almost, I don't know, a couple of hundred Marines. It was the largest number of Marines killed since the Tet Offensive, for goodness sake. And I said, to have survivor's remorse, from being involved in a situation like that. I said, you could easily use that. And so I think that was something that they were working on for the future. And then there are always characters, that you want to see, ever since, book 1, Walt has a dog that he, adopts, and it's a fun character to have because, I don't know about you guys like that, but I'm basically writing about a guy, an armed man who drives around all over Wyoming armed by himself. I could either have him talk to himself, which kind of worries me because armed people that talk to themselves worry me a little bit. The other option was to have him talk to the dog, which we all do. We all talk to our pets, for goodness sake. I mean, every morning I go down and talk with the horses about what I'm going to write that day, and they pay very close attention because I haven't fed them yet. And so...
And then they offer their feedback afterwards, right? Usually like a plop, plop.
They tell you they feel like there should be more horses in the book. I don't know what that's about, but anyway. And so anyway, like that, for me, like that's one of the key elements, that give Walt that opportunity to be able to do that stream of consciousness kind of thought. Like, so the dog would be a good character. There are some places that I would have liked to have seen, how they would have been portrayed, like the Busy Bee Cafe, where Walt goes in and has his usual, like at his breakfast, little things like that, But I mean, we had a run of like 3 years on A&E, and we were the highest rated scripted drama that they ever had. And then what happened was they went to Warner Brothers and said, we want to buy Longmire, and Warner wouldn't sell it. And so they got all pissy and canceled the show, which did them no good whatsoever because they lost about a third of their entire audience, which I think they're struggling to still try and recoup, from almost like 10 years ago or even longer. And then, it got picked up by Netflix. And we ran on Netflix for 3 seasons. And then, of course, it was a very popular show on Netflix. And so Netflix goes to Warner Brothers and says, we want to buy Longmire. And Warner said, we didn't sell it, to A&E. We're probably not going to sell it to you. So they kind of let it, drift away because they figured, it's popular now, but when we stop making episodes, it'll kind of die off and that'll be the end of it. Well, it ran for another 10 years. And, I think what happened was the sweetheart deal that Netflix had as a producer, for Longmire with Warner Brothers, I think that contract kind of ran out after 10 years. And so then they basically had to let the show go back to Warner Brothers. And so now the rumors that we're hearing now, of course, are that like Warner Brothers is working on their own streaming platform, the same one that, the same type of one that has Paramount has. And so we'll see what happens as to whether or not Walt will ride again, in the cinematic universe.
2 more questions we're going to ask you before we kind of let you get on your way, and we appreciate it. But one of them is like, obviously the publishing industry has changed kind of drastically since The Cold Dish came out in 2004. So what kind of advice, and I heard you say you have students as well. So what kind of advice do you offer to new crime writers who are trying to kind of come into it now, into this landscape?
Well, it's so different now like that because the print medium like that, really has taken a hit. I mean, newspapers and magazines and that type of thing that used to be the lifeblood of how it was that you really, got the word out, about your books. Like that have really kind of, in many ways gone along the wayside. Not for me. I mean, I still, I have magazines I subscribe to. I've got newspapers that I have delivered here at the ranch in Wyoming, like that on a weekly basis. And so, I still keep in touch with all those things, but I'm a little bit of a dinosaur, and so there are an awful lot of people out there that really rely on, where we are now. They really do. They get their news, from this computer first thing in the morning. They get all of their social media information, from this thing all day long, with little notifications, and posting things and all that type of thing. So I think that's one of the big changes, that's happened is that you really do have to rely so much on social media. That's where the buzz, really kind of hits. That's where it gains traction, and that's when, things happen. But a lot of the same rules, that were around 25 years ago, are still in play today. Whenever you get signed up, with a big editor and a big publisher and a big house or something like that, a lot of people think, oh, well, then that's it. That, your problems are over with. Now you can just like lay back and, and you'll sell millions of books like that. Well, they can only do so much like that, especially in the world of social media, you yourself are going to have to get out there, and whether you like it or not, kind of put yourself out there and a little bit forward. I'm fortunate like that I was kind of at the front edge of a lot of social media like that and was able to cultivate a bit of a persona like that and information about the books like that over the years as time went by. The one big thing I think, that I always tell young authors is don't get on there and just talk about your books. Don't get on there and just go buy my books. Don't be the person on the panel that constantly picks up their book and waves it, in front of people or something like that. I mean, try and say things that are, worthwhile listening to, for goodness sake, and then, you have to introduce them to a certain amount of your world. I'm not saying that you have to invite them into your home like that and tell them every personal fact that you have, but, to make them, feel as though they're kind of connected to you like that. Social media is a wonderful opportunity to be able to do that. And it opens up all kinds of opportunities as far as like being able to get out there and let people know where you are and what you're doing. I've noticed that, used to, authors would go out for 3 and 4 week tours. When I first started doing this, that's what I did. I mean, at one point in time, I think one of the highest ones I had one tour that was 63 events, and that was a monster. But when I first started out, I remember Viking Penguin, I asked him, I said, well, what kind of a tour are we going to do? And they said, well, it's going to be mostly local author events. And I was like, in Wyoming, we're going to do local author events.
I know these 20 people. They already bought my book.
So we're going to hit Gillette and Sheridan and Casper. Okay. Maybe Billings on a stretch like that. And so they expanded it after that because I think, the reviews were really good for the cold dish. It got a really good response, sold really well like that. And so they expanded that and turned it into, I think it was like about a 2-week tour, which was a national tour. And, I was talking to my publicist at that point in time, and I said, well, look, how about I make a deal with you guys? And they said, okay, well, what's the deal? And I said, how about, I've got a motorcycle, an old motorcycle that gets about 87 miles to the gallon. And I can take that motorcycle and I can shoot up into Montana, across Idaho, into Washington, down through Oregon, back through, Utah and back into Wyoming. And I will have taken up an entire quarter of the United States. It'll be over a 5,000 mile loop on a motorcycle. I said, but you'll no longer be responsible for a whole quarter of the country. So what do you guys say to that? Like that. And they said that was a great idea. They also thought that it would be really great PR because it was in Publishers Weekly. There were all these interviews that I did, with Kirkus, and Library Journal and all of these different ones like that, about, going out and riding on this motorcycle. Nobody had much done that before like that. I didn't know why because it seemed kind of obvious to me. But anyway, only after about a year or two, I started turning up on the Pacific Northwest bestsellers lists. And they were very excited about that. But I think it all kind of goes back to, what I was starting to say in the beginning of the answer to your question. I'm finally circling back around after all of that, is that you do have to take a certain amount of responsibility for yourself. You do have to take, and jump on that and, a horse and ride and realize that there are going to be opportunities that you're going to be able to take that will, give you chances to maybe broaden your readership, which is another key element too. You don't just do the same things over and over and over again. You need to find ways to broaden that readership and go out and maybe talk to people who haven't read your books, not just the people that do.
I have an important question real fast. What kind of motorcycle was it?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing.
I knew you were. I was trying to beat you to it.
I'm a motorcycle rider, so I need to know.
You're going to get me in trouble because I got 5 of them. Luckily, they're out of earshot, so they can't hear. It actually was because where I live in Wyoming, there are more dirt and gravel roads than there are paved roads. And so I think it was in the mid 90s, in early to mid 90s, BMW came out with a GS version that.
Oh, yes.
A dual sport bike, with the opposing 2-cylinder, I think it was 1150 cc's. So a good big dual purpose bike where you could get on that bike and you could ride it for 8 hours on the road and still be comfortable and still be able to walk, when you got there. And then also if you spotted something, you saw a road or something like that, you thought, that looks interesting. I think I want to go in that direction. You could jump off like that and go on those gravel and dirt, off road with that bike too, like that. And so it's kind of handy like that, for where it is that I live. I can go an awful lot of different places where an awful lot of other bikes wouldn't be able to do it.
That's great. My that's what I had. The last bike I had was an adventure bike. It was the Ducati Multistrada. But my wife rode the smaller because she's only 5'2", so she can't touch on the big 1100 or the 800. Yeah. So she had to get the smaller
really
BMW.
High heels on that one. I don't know.
She'd have to slip one arse cheek off and get one foot on the ground and make sure she picked the right side. But we went all over. Every once in a while it did, but she's incredibly robust. She'd pick it back up and get on with it. Yeah. All right. A couple of questions to wrap this up and we'll let you off the hook. So something we ask everyone is, what do you feel is your author's superpower?
Dialogue. One of my degrees is actually in playwriting. And the reason behind that was the thought being that, you only got so many tools, to tell a story, in a novel. And it seemed to me that, the books that I really enjoyed an awful lot of the time were these really sharp dialogue books. I mean, Robert Parker immediately comes to mind, Elmore Leonard, immediately comes to mind. These are guys that like really heard, what people said and how they said it. And I mean, the words, the syntax, the rhythm, everything about it. And so I aspired to that, and I thought, okay, well, other than going to the bus stop and sitting there and listening to people, what other opportunities have you got, to try and learn about dialogue? And it dawned on me that, these playwright guys, that's all they've got is dialogue. Like, and so maybe to go and maybe research, and actually work as a playwright, for 2 years like that, maybe that would be something that would help me to elaborate those skills, like that, maybe get better at it. And the other thing it did, though, was also very helpful was probably dramatic structure. You can't read people like Shakespeare and Chekhov and Edward Albee and all these people like that do these amazing jobs of, putting, the characters on the page with that limited ability. And so for me, that was kind of one of the fun things to do. Like that was to try and develop that sense of dialogue like that. And generally, that's what a lot of people write back and say, that's one of the key elements to your books. Whenever George Guidall first started doing the audio versions of my books, I remember talking with him and he said, so what's your education in writing? And he says, and don't give me the all shucks, I'm just an old cowboy bullshit, because I've read your work and I know there's some kind of education down in there somewhere. And I said, you know what? One of my degrees is in playwriting. And he goes, I knew it. And I said, how did you know? And he said, you never use the phrases he said, she said. He said, you always have the character tip their hat back, drop their glasses down on their nose. You give them some kind of physical action to give us an indication of who that character is, and then try and make sure that the voice that's disseminated, like it is differentiated enough so that we know who that character is just simply by the way that they say it. And that was probably one of the best compliments I ever got in my entire life.
That's so important for audiobooks, because once you get in that string of this said, you said, so if you can use other cues to do it.
Yeah, there's only a guy, and a man, and a woman in a room. Okay, we got it. Like so, he said, she said, he said. Yeah.
People get divisive about that too. So, we have one more question for you. This comes from our wheel of questions.
Okay,
so it's
all
a
right,
little fun. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Not a brainer. It's got nice sound effects to go with it.
Hollywood nothing.
Yeah, we got nothing. Okay. All right. So, Craig, what is your, and I know you said you didn't watch a lot of TV, but what is the current thing you might be binge watching right now?
Oh, God. There isn't anything. There isn't anything I'm watching right now. I mean, so much of my time is reading for the books. There's always so much research and so much stuff that I want to read, before I tackle a book, while I'm writing that book, after I've written that book. That I just, I watch a lot of old movies like that, to be honest with you. If I feel like sitting down and actually watching something like that, I'll just sit down and watch an old movie. There was an old John Mills film that came up the other night called Ice Cold and Alex, which is a marvelous British film about this small group of people that are trying to get this wounded soldier through the deserts of North Africa during World War II. It's an old black and white with some really spectacular, people in it. And of course, the first thing that happens is I see something interesting, in a movie or a television show, and I'm like, I bet that's based off of a book. And of course, it was based off of a book. Okay, and so there I am now reading Ice Cold and Alex, like that, and so, because I appreciate, cinematic work and all that, but it's never going to be the same as a book. It's just not. Whenever anybody asks me, well, all this, Hollywood certainly seems to have an advantage, doesn't it? And I'm like, yeah, it does to a point, but there's one thing that we've got that they don't have. And they're always like, well, what's that? And I'm like, it's called the reader's imagination. Hollywood is always going to have to commit to casting, to direction, lenses, costuming, location, all these things, but they're force feeding you their vision of what this world is. Whereas a book is just this, this invitation to your imagination to step into this world and make it your own. Before Robert Taylor ever played Walt Longmire on the TV show Longmire, I could have gone into a room of 100 people and brought, like a courtroom artist with me. and had everybody there describe what they think Walt Longmire looked like, and we would have had 100 different Walt Longmire.
Different versions, yeah.
That's the beauty of the written word.
That is a brilliant note to end on. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, Craig. This has been an absolute pleasure.
This is one of the funnest interviews I have ever done, like that. And so, let's wait a little while, and you guys call me again. Like, let's do this all over again.
We will do it again.
You've got a date, mate. No problem.
Absolutely.
And hopefully, I know Doug's run into you at one of the conferences. Hopefully, I'll get the same pleasure down the road.
Absolutely. Hey, you know what? If you make it here to Wyoming, I've got 5 motorcycles. If you need a loaner,
now you're talking.
Careful, because my mum lives not that far south of you in Fort Collins, Colorado.
There you go.
So I might come knocking on your door.
Come on up. As you head north on I-25, you'll notice the traffic just disappears after Cheyenne. You'll know you're getting close.
She rode up there to get a horse last year, and she said the same thing. She said it thinned out pretty good as she got up there.
It does. It does. I mean, it's funny because we have a lot of people like that, from other countries like that. They'll come and, they say it gets a little spooky after a while because you're driving along for hours and you don't see anybody. Like, and you think, has something happened that I don't know about or what? Anyway, you're always more than welcome, guys.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you. My pleasure.
What a freaking episode that was.
That was so much fun. I'm telling you, so much fun. Yes, he's exactly what you expect out of a really awesome author like that. Like he's so friendly and just congenial. It was just wonderful. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the craft notes out of there. It's like, oh my God, I can't wait to re-listen to it all and make notes. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you noticed over here. I'm like, I got to remember that. I was taking notes. I was like, this guy is brilliant. But I mean, I don't know. His books are just brilliant anyway. Like, I'm not kidding when I say like setting is like his setting is so much almost it's a character in itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so amazing. I honestly, it's going to take me like a good 24 hours of sitting on that interview to really process it for myself. So.
Hopefully you guys really enjoyed that interview too. And we're on Patreon. So if you feel like you're getting value from interviews like the one we just did.
How do you not? That was so brilliant.
Yeah, my little mini masterclass. So patreon.com/The Two Authors Podcast. You can find us there. For a few bucks a month, you can support the show, and we would really appreciate it. This is a passion project for us, so we don't make any money at it. Although we are helped by our good friends at Vellum, who support the show, and they're wonderful people. So thanks, as always, to Vellum. Find a link to Vellum in the show notes, along with Craig Johnson's information and our Patreon. Until next time, be cool to each other.
Fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors Podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favorite platform for new shows coming every week.